In the previous part, we were able to set up our app. We created a few components. We also created some config files, created a theme file which contains the colors for our application, and also some constants that we'll be needing in the application. Also, we set up a screen file, which is the home screen that we are seeing currently. Also, we created some utilities, one for context and also the other for storing data. And in this application, we'll be storing data using async storage. Lastly, we set up our app.js file to be able to fetch all the data it needs before the splash screen is hidden. So we'll keep the splash screen on the screen until we fetch all the data that we need for the app. Now in this part, we'll be working on the onboarding of the application. For the onboarding, we have these 3 screens that we are going to work on. So we'll be creating these 3 screens in the application. And the concept of the onboarding is that this set of onboarding screens will be shown to the user just once. That is when the app is installed for the first time. So after the app is used for the first time, we'll no longer show these screens to the user. So we'll create these screens and after that, implement the logic that will be needed to ensure that it's shown just once to the user. To start our work, let's prepare some data for the onboarding screens. So inside our config directory, we'll add a new file for data. Now usually the data we'll be storing here will come from an API, but because we are working on just the front end, we need to define some data here to enable us to create the screens. So we'll export the data, which we'll call onboarding data. And this will be an array. And in this array, we'll be having 3 objects. And each of the objects will be having 4 properties. Now the properties will be based on what we are displaying on the onboarding screens. So we see that for each of the screens, we have an image, we have a title, we have a summary. And we also give each of the screens an ID. So for the first one, we'll give it an ID of 1. And also we'll give it a title. Enjoy all the finest and popular wines. Also give it a summary and also an image. For the summary, I'll just grab some text from lorem ipsum. So in my browser, I'll just copy the first line from lorem ipsum. And then I'll paste it as a summary. Now for the image, I have 3 images that I've downloaded already, which I'll be using for the onboarding. So these are the 3 images that I'll be using. So I'll copy the images into our assets directory. So first of all, inside the asset directory, I'll create a new directory, which I'll call onboarding. And then I'll grab my images and then copy them into the onboarding directory. So over here for the first image, we'll pass require. Then over here, we'll specify the path to the image. So since we are in the data file, we'll go back a directory to assets and then to onboarding and then to the first image. And then we'll do the same for all the other objects. Now I'll define the other objects already, so I'll just copy them and paste them here. Like so. So this is all the data we need for our 3 onboarding screens. With this done, let's set up a screen file for our onboarding. So over here, we go to the screens directory and then we'll create a new file. We'll call this screen welcome. And then in this file, we'll create a component for welcome. Then we export this screen as the default. Now we have to ensure that we export this screen in the index file. So over here, we import the welcome screen and then export it again. Now over here, let's start by importing some components from React Native. So first of all, we need the view. Also, we'll need the image component and also the style sheet. We import all these components from React Native. With this done, we return the view as the main component. Then inside this, we'll have all the other components. Now to see the output of what we are doing, let's go to the app.js file and import the welcome screen. So in addition to the home, we add the welcome screen. And then over here, we replace the home with welcome. Now we go back to the welcome file. Over here, the topmost component is the image. So we render the image here. And for the source, we will get it from the onboarding data. So at the top, we import the onboarding data. Like so, from the config data file. Now, since we have more than one object in the onboarding data, at the top of the welcome component, let's create a variable, which we'll call active screen. And we'll set the value to 1 for now. So currently, we want to display the content of the very first onboarding screen. So over here to the image, we pass the source attribute. And then for the value, we'll set onboarding data. And then we pass the active screen -1. So since the active screen is 1, we take out 1 so that we have 0, and that will be the index of the array. And in particular, we are referring to the image, so .image, like so. And that should give us the first image for the onboarding screen. Now let's take a look at the onboarding screens again. If you take a good look at it, you see that at the background, we have the same image that we are displaying here, also faintly displayed in the background. So meaning we are displaying the image twice, and it's the same for all the other screens. So the very first image we've displayed here, we'll style it to occupy the background. So for that, we'll pass a style to it. And it will be from our style sheet. So say styles dot background image. Then for the actual one that is displayed on the page, we'll have another view. And inside this view, we'll have that image and the other content. So beneath this, let's create our style sheet. So we'll have styles, that will be the style sheet dot create. And we have the background image. But even before that, the outermost view also has some styling. So we'll call this styles.container. And before the background image, we'll have the container. For the container, the styles will be passing reflex of 1, and we'll justify the content to have space around it. Also, we'll give it a background color of our primary color. So meaning we need to bring in our colors. So at the top, we import our colors. That'll be from the theme file. And then over here, we set the background color to colors.primary. And lastly, we'll give it a padding horizontal of 35. For the background image, we want it to fill the entire screen. So we'll do this by the help of using the style sheet. So over here, we will spread the style sheet dot absolute fill object. And then in addition, we'll set a height of 100%. We have to wrap this in the string to make it work. And then lastly, we want to give it an opacity of 0.1. so that it will be faintly in the background as we have in our images. Next, you want to work on the actual content on the page. So inside this view, we'll have another view at the top just for the image. So we'll have this view, and then inside this will be the image. For this image, the source will be just like the first image here. So we can copy and paste it. And the style too, we can copy and paste it. However, we'll change the style to styles.image. And then for the view that wraps the image, we'll give it a style. So this will be styles.image container. And then beneath this view will be the text content of the page. So for that, we'll bring in our style text. So at the top, we import style text from our component. And below this, we use the style text. The first one will be for the title. So over here, we'll use onboarding data once again. And then we'll use the active screen -1. So we can copy and paste it. And then we target the title. Also, we'll give it a style. So styles.title. Now this will be very similar to the summary. So we can copy this whole text and paste it again. This time around, the styles will be styles.summary. And also, we'll target the summary data. Now let's go to our style sheet and add some of the styles, starting with the image container. For the image container, we want to set the dimensions as a fraction of the width of the screen. So meaning we need to know the width of our screen. And for that, we define a constant for it. So at the top, we import screen width. And that can be found in our constant file. And over here, we'll first set the width. And for that, we want to set the screen width -70 pixels. If you remember, inside the container, we are setting a padding horizontal of 35. So 35 on both ends will add up to 70. That's why we are taking 70 out of the screen width. Now we want the displayed image to be a square. If you have a look at the images here, it's a complete square. So over here, the height to be the same dimensions. So we can copy and paste this. And then change the property here to height. And after this, we'll give it a border radius. That'll be 45 pixels. And also want to give it margin at the bottom of 35. And also we want to set the overflow property to hidden. Now let's style the image itself. So pass the image style. And for this, we'll set the height and width to 100%. We are doing this so that all the time, the image will fill the entire container we created over here. And lastly, we'll set a resize mode of cover. Now we see that our border radius is not showing. So let's restart the app and see whether it fixes it. So over here, I'll bring up my context menu. Then I'll reload it. Okay, and now it works. So now let's move to the text properties, starting with the title. For the title, we'll start with the font size. So we'll give it a value of 25. We also want to give it a font weight of bold. And then we'll set the text align to the center. And then we'll give it a margin at the bottom of 15. Like so. Also, we'll start the summary. For the summary, we'll align the text to the center. And then we'll set a color. So that will be colors.our tertiary color. Like so. That should make it a bit light. Now what is left? Let's look at our images. We see that beneath this, we have an indication for the current page we are on and also a button. So let's work on it. So for all the content that's left here, we'll group them in another view. So just below this, we'll have another view. And for this view, we'll give it a style. So that'll be styles.bottom content. And inside this, we'll have another view. And that will be for the page indicators. So let's apply the style as well. So style equals styles.page indicators. For the actual indicators, we're making use of icons from material community icons. So we import that from Expo vector icons. So we have material community icons. And we'll get that from at Expo vector icons. So over here in the view, for the number of icons we render will be based on the onboarding data. So over here, we can call the onboarding data and use the map method. Then we can open a function like so. So for each item in the onboarding data, we'll return the material community icon. The name of the icon we'll be returning is the checkbox blank circle outline. Now we are having this error because the spelling of the community here is wrong. We need to ensure that the spelling is correct at the top too. So we get rid of this and it should work fine. So now these are our three indicators. For the icon, we also give it a size of 15. Also, we'll give it a color. And that will be a faint version of our tertiary color. Colors of tertiary plus 33. And also, since we are using the map method, it should have a key. For the key to be the same as the ID of the current onboarding item. So from the map function, we can access the item. Then we can pass the key property to the icon and then we'll set the value as item.id. So that will be the key for each of the indicators. Now to make the indicators useful, one of them has to be styled differently to indicate the current screen that we are on. So if we are on the first screen, the first indicator has to be styled differently to indicate that. To help us do that, before the return, we'll make a check. So at the top here, we'll first check if the item.id is the same as the active screen. So if that is the case, we can copy the return here and paste it here and then style it a bit differently. So first of all, we change the icon to checkbox blank circle, but no longer the outline. We want the deepened one, as we can see here. The size will stay the same. However, for the color, we'll change it to our accent color. And then we'll add CC to it to lighten it a bit. The key to remain the same so that it matches the current ID of the item. With this done, we have to style it to be horizontal and also in the middle of the page. So down at the bottom here, we add the style for bottom content. And also we add the style for page indicators. For the bottom content, we align the items to be in the center. And also we set a margin at the bottom of 25. For the page indicators, we set a flex direction of row. Then we set a margin at the bottom of 15 pixels. Now just below this, we have our button. So just below our page indicators, that is this view, we'll have a start button. So meaning you have to import the start button from our components. And below here, we render the start button. For the first page, the start button will say next, like so. And also we'll have an icon at the right. So we'll pass an icon name and the value will be arrow right. Now with this done, we have most of the looks that we are going after, with the exception of the header here and also the skip at the top. To help us to do this, we need a header, and we can get a header by setting up a stack navigator. And this same stack navigator will help us to navigate between the pages. So let's install the stack navigator from React Navigation. So at the bottom here, we first cancel our server. And then we can install the stack navigator using npm expo install at react navigation/stack. With the installation complete, we can start the app once again. And then we can reload our app here. To get back on track. Now inside our project, we'll create a new directory. This directory will be called navigators. And inside navigators, we'll create our first navigator. And this we'll call onboarding stack. In this file, we'll create the onboarding stack component. And we export as default the onboarding stack. For this component, we import the create stack navigator function from React Navigation stack, the package we just installed. Then at the top, we'll create a stack by calling the create stack navigator function like so. And inside the onboarding stack, we'll return a stack.navigator. And inside the stack navigator, we'll have screens. So stack.screen. Now the screen we'll have in this stack will be the welcome screen that we have here. So we need to import the welcome screen. So import welcome from the screens. And then we pass it to the screen here. So the name will be welcome. And the component will be welcome as well. Now to see the output of this, let's go into the app file and import the onboarding stack. So over here, we import the onboarding stack. And then down here, we replace the welcome with onboarding stack. Now the app is struggling to refresh, so I'll refresh it manually by reloading it. Now we see our screen with our new header. Back in the onboarding stack, let's style it a bit, and we'll do that on the stack navigator. So over here, we pass screen options. And the first property we pass is header title align. Set the value to center. This will move the header to the center. Next, we want to change the color of the text. So that will be header tint color. And then we want to set the color to colors.tint. And the colors will be coming from our config theme file, like so. Next, we want to display the skip text at the right here. So if you look at our images, we have skip at the right of two screens. So for this, it's a button that you can press to skip going through all these pages. So we want to render a button over there. So for that, we'll do it with the header right property. And this will be a function like so. So we import our start button from our components. Now for the header right, we can replace all this with a start button. And the text we want is skip. And then we go ahead to style it inline. So we set a height of auto and then a width of auto. Also give it a padding of 10 and a background color of transparent. Now we style the text in the button itself. So that will be through the text style property. For this, we'll give it a color of accent. So our color is .accent. Also we'll give it a font size of 14 and then a font weight of normal. Now to align the end of the text to the content of the page, we'll set a header right container style. So that will be after our header right here. So we'll have a header right container style. And for this, we'll set the right property to 25. And that should align the text with the content on the page. Next, we want the header here to blend into the content on the page. So we'll set a header transparent to true. Now this creates a problem as the content of the page has now entered the header. But this will fix it on the welcome page. So over here on the welcome page, at the top, we want to import the header height context. This is something that we did in the previous part. So at the top here, we import header height context from React navigation elements. And once we do this, we need the use context hook. So at the top, we import use context from React like so. And we go to the inner view of the page and then we pass a style property. And then we set a margin at the top and then pass the use context hook and then the header height context. This should push the content down and then we'll have the look that we are going for. Let's get rid of this header import here as it is not needed. Now we have the looks that we're going for. So everything looks like the design we have here. However, there is one issue that we need to fix with the back button, but that will become clear when we set up the navigation and then we can fix it. Now let's work on the dynamic aspects, starting with the navigation. So with the navigation, it starts by pressing on the button we have here. So when the button is pressed, we move to the next page in the onboarding screens. So to do that, we need a navigation variable, and that we can get by importing the use navigation hook. So at the top here, we import use navigation from React Navigation Native. Then at the top here in the welcome screen, we declare navigation and initialize it to use navigation. Now we scroll down to where we have our start button and then we pass the onPress property and then we pass a function to it. Now in this function, we'll trigger the navigation, and in this situation, make use of the push. Now usually you use the navigate function over here, that is navigation.navigate, But in this case, we'll be navigating to the same screen, but we want the content to change. So to force that to happen, we make use of the push instead of the navigate. If we use the navigate, we can't navigate to the same screen and have the page refreshed. So the screen we'll be passing is the welcome screen. And then we want to pass some data in the route params. So over here, we'll pass active screen. And then the value will be active screen +1. So meaning we are still on the welcome screen, but we want the active screen to be increased by 1. Now to make this work, we go to the very top and create a state for the active screen. So we bring in the use state from React. So at the top, we convert this to a state. So we wrap this in the bracket. And then over here, we pass use state. And then for the value, we'll use the route.params. So we bring in the route from the properties. And then we target route.params.activeScreen. If that is not provided, we fall back to the 1. With this done, if we press on the button, the navigation should happen. And then we can go back to the previous screen. Now while on the second screen, if we bring up our screens that we are looking at, we see that the back button is different. This is the button you normally get on the iOS device. However, I want it to be the same across board. So we'll change it to this icon and then style it to be in line with the content on the page. So we'll go back to the onboarding stack, and then right below the header transparent, we'll pass the header back image. And this will be a component as well. For this, we want to use an icon from the feather icon pack. So at the top here, we import feather from Expo vector icons. And then over here, we return the feather icon. The name of the icon will be chevron left. And we'll give it a size of 35. Now for the color, we'll be getting it from the header itself. So over here with the structure tint color, then we pass it to the color of the icon. Now beneath this, we pass the header left container style. And for this, on iOS, we'll set a different value compared to the Android. So we'll bring in our constant on iOS. Remember, we declared this in the constant file. It tells us whether we are on iOS or not. So over here, we set the left property. And if you're on iOS, we set the value to 22. Otherwise, we set it to 12. Like so that to be in line with the content. In addition, on iOS, there is a header back title. So we want to hide that as well. So we set header back title visible to false. With this done, let's move to the last page and see something. If I bring up our screens, we see that on the last page, we have no skip at the right side, but in our case, we do. And also the text here has been changed to explore. And over here, we still have the next. So we need to work on that. And we'll do this on the welcome page. So first of all, we need a way to tell when we are on the last screen. So just below the active screen, we'll create a new variable on last screen. And this will be true if the active screen the same as onboarding.length. So if this situation is true, meaning we are on the last screen, the current screen, which is the active screen, is the same as the length of our onboarding data. Now, if we have this data, the first thing we want to do is to hide the skip button. So to be able to do that, we need the use effect hook. So we bring in the use effect hook. Then over here, we create the use effect hook, then pass a function to it. Then we pass our empty array. Now over here, we check if we are on the last screen. And if that is the case, we want to use navigation.setOptions. And then we'll set the header right to an empty fragment. Now this should be a function. Yes, like so. Now if we save this and then navigate to the last screen, the skip is no longer at the right side. Now let's handle the button. So down here, we scroll to where we have the button. And then inside here, we check whether we're on the last screen. So in the case of us being on the last screen, the text we want to return is explore. Otherwise, we'll stick to the next. So now if we scroll to the last screen, we see that we have explore instead of next. Now let's look at how we can actually complete the onboarding and skip when we want to. So to do that, at the very top, we'll create a new function. So we'll call this function complete onboarding. And this will be an async function. Now for this function, the very first place we'll call it is when we are on the last page. So down here where we have the button, if you're on the last page, we are not pushing the welcome screen anymore, but rather we are completing the onboarding. So over here in the onPress, we first check if we are on the last screen. And if that's the case, we'll straight away return complete onboarding, like so. Once you do that, the navigation.push here will not be called. Now inside the complete onboarding here, we open our try catch block. And over here, if you have any error, we just console.warn it for now. Now to complete the onboarding, we need to indicate in our storage and also in our context that the user has gone through all the onboarding screens. So we no longer need to show the user the onboarding screens, but rather we need to jump straight into the content of the app. So to do that, we first need to bring in our store data function. That is the function we created to store data in the async storage. So over here at the top, we import store data. So that will be in the utilities/storage. And also for the context, we'll go into the utilities to the context file, and then we'll create a context for the onboarding. So over here, we'll export, and then we'll create onboarding context. And then we'll call the create context like so. Now for the initial value of the onboarding context, it will be created in the app.js file. So over here, we'll set up the context a bit. So at the top, we'll create a state for the context. That is the onboarding context. So meaning we bring in the useState hook from React. And over here, the context will be monitoring whether the app has been onboarded already. So over here, the state is when app onboarded. And then we'll have set is when app onboarded. And then the initial value will be false. And to make this context data accessible in the app, let's import the onboarding context. So the onboarding context. And then in the return of the app, around the navigation container, we'll have onboarding context.provider. and then we wrap this around the navigation container. Now for this, the value will be set to is wine app onboarded and also set is wine app onboarded. So you can copy and paste it here. More work will be done here in a bit, but let's go back to the welcome screen. So now over here, when the onboarding is completed, first we want to update these values that we just created. So first of all, we await and store this in our async storage. And the key we'll be using is at wineup : onboarding. Then we'll set the value to true. And after this is done, we update the context as well. So to do that, we already have the use context hook. So let's import the onboarding context as well. Onboarding context. And then at the top here, all we need is the set function. So set is wine app onboarded. Then we use the use context hook and pass onboarding context like so. Then after storing the data, we set is wine app onboarded to true as well. Now how we are doing this, we want to indicate the activity that's going on. So when we press on the last button, we want to show the activity indicator. So to help us do that, let's create a state variable. So we'll create a new state. This we'll call completing onboarding. Then set completing onboarding. Now the initial value will be false. And over here in the complete onboarding function, once we click on the button, we want to set completing onboarding to true. And once it's done, we want to set completing onboarding to false. If there is any error as well, we want to set completing onboarding to false. Now over here, updating the context and also changing completing onboarding to false is very fast. So we want to wrap this in a timeout so that we wait about 500 milliseconds before we update this after it has been stored in the async storage. So we set timeout and then we pass a function. And then the time will be 500 milliseconds. Now for the completing onboarding, we'll pass to the button. So over here, we'll do so through the is loading property. Then we'll pass completing onboarding. Completing onboarding, like so. Now the completing onboarding we've done here, we had the last page in mind. That is when the explore button is pressed. However, it's the same concept for when we press on the skip here, just that we'll not get to the last page before we complete it. So over here, let's copy the complete onboarding function. Actually, let's add the context to it as well as the completing onboarding. So we copy this and go to the onboarding stack. That is where we have our skip button. Yes, this one. So inside the onboarding stack component, we paste this function. Now we need to make a few imports. First of all, we need use context hook from React. Also, we need the onboarding context. So we import onboarding context like so. And then we need the use state hook. Now inside the onboarding, we need to bring in store data. So we import store data from the storage utilities. And then that looks like we are good to go. Now what we'll do is to pass the complete onboarding to the escape button. So over here, first pass on press, then we'll set complete onboarding. And also we'll pass it's loading, and then we'll pass completing onboarding, like so. Now before we can test this, let's go to the app.js file. Now over here, if the wine app is onboarded, we no longer want to return the onboarding stack, but rather we go straight to the home screen. So over here, we'll make a check to see whether it's wine app onboarded. If that's the case, we'll return the home screen. Otherwise, we return the onboarding stack. Once we've done this, we can test it out. So what we can do is to use the last screen. So we go to the last screen, and over here we have the Explore. So once we press on Explore, close, and then we have the wine app, meaning we are done onboarding. So we don't need the onboarding screens anymore. But now there is a problem. What about if we refresh the app? So if I go to my context menu and then I reload the app, once the app loads, we are back to the onboarding stack. This is not what we want to do. Once I've gone through the onboarding, my subsequent visits, I should go straight to the app. So what we are going to do is that while the app is preparing, remember we said we'll fetch all the data that we need in the prepare app function. So over here, we need to check whether the user has onboarded already. Then we update is wine app onboarded so that we can go straight to the home screen. So over here, we need the get data function. So at the top, we import get data from our storage utility. And then over here, while preparing the app, we await get data. Now the key that we are getting should be exactly the same as the one we stored it with. So inside the onboarding stack, we can copy the name, that is at wine app onboarding. Then over here in the app, we pass the key. Now let's assign a variable to it. So call this one onboarding status. Remember the value we stored is just true or false. So once we have this onboarding status, if there is a value for it, we want to update this. So we set is wine app onboarded and then pass the onboarding status like so. And we didn't even finish writing the code and we are back on the home page. So meaning the app has been onboarded already. Now we are done with almost everything. We can get rid of the welcome screen here. But let's find a way to test the escape as well. So quickly, I will import async storage directly. And then over here in the prepare app, I'll call async storage dot remove item. Then I'll pass this key. And I can comment this out and then refresh the app. So I'll bring up my context menu and then reload the app. This should remove the onboarding data from our async storage so that we can have a fresh slate to start with. So once we have it like so, I can undo all we've done. And then we can now test it again. To be sure we have an empty data in the async storage, I can reload it once again. And then once we come back to the onboarding, meaning the data has been removed. Now for the escape, we just press on the escape. It should load and then we are back on the wine app. Now let's refresh the app again. And then once again, we are back on the home page. So meaning it's working as expected. I'll put a link to the codes that we've written today in the description so you can check it out.